next few days I just want to share some thoughts with you from Exodus chapter 4. Let's pick up reading in verse 1. Exodus chapter 4 verse 1, Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me, and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." And Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out his hand and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you."
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Moses is living in Midian, and he's a shepherd, and he's on the backside of the desert. He finds himself at Mount Horeb, which is called the Mountain of God. And while he's there, he sees a burning bush. It's a bush that's on fire, but it's not being consumed. And he goes over out of curiosity, and God begins to speak to him. And as God starts speaking to him, he starts speaking to Moses about what he was passionate about what he had saw in Egypt when he saw the Egyptian abusing the Hebrew. God begins to reveal to him that, "Moses, I've heard the cry of my people, and I want to deliver them, and I want you to be the one who goes to Egypt and who delivers them from the oppression that they're experiencing." Moses is concerned that people aren't going to listen to him, and that people aren't going to receive him as a leader or someone that's heard from God. And where we pick up in chapter 4, verse 1, Moses is having this conversation and says, "Nobody's going to listen to me." And God looks at Moses and he says, "Moses, what is in your hand?" I have a good friend named Stan Drew. He's a missionary in Swaziland. I've heard him preach a whole message on that one phrase. Just such a powerful phrase. See, sometimes when God is working His plan out in our life, His plan to release our destiny, He doesn't start by looking at whatever somebody else can do in our life, but instead He often starts with that question, "What's in your hand?" You know, many times we need deliverance. We need God to do a miracle in our life. We need God to accomplish something great in our life, and we're looking around somewhere else for the answer. And God starts by asking, "What's in your hand?" See, that shepherd's staff would have been so significant. It would have been so important to Moses because that was his job. That was his identity. That's what he did. He was Moses the shepherd at this point in his life, and that shepherd's staff would have been his identity. It would have summed up who he was and what he did. That shepherd's staff would have went with him everywhere. And God said, "Moses, start with who you are. Start with where you're at. Start with what's happening in your life right now, where I've brought you, what's been done in your life so far." The second thing that I noticed from this passage is that when God tells Moses to throw his staff down on the ground and it turns into a snake, that Moses runs from the snake. It's so alarming or scary to him that he runs from it. Now, I understand people being scared of snakes. Like most of you, I've always thought of my dad as, you know, the strongest guy in the world who wasn't afraid of anything. But I'll remember as a child that you could get with a rubber snake or a grass snake or something like that. You could get my dad so shook up because he was just that scared of snakes. And so I understand what it's like when someone is scared of a snake. But you got to think about it. I mean, here's a guy who has killed an Egyptian, hid his body in the sand, run for his life, and now he's standing here talking to a bush that's on fire but not being consumed and hearing audible voices. And in the midst of all of that, he's going to choose to run from or be scared of a snake. I just wonder how many times in our life that God has chosen to anoint or empower our identity, our staff, our talents, our abilities, and it scared us. We ran from it. We were alarmed by what was going on in our life as God began to empower us and begin to empower our identity and begin to empower our gifts. And you know, that staff was important to Moses. God used it throughout all of his ministry, really, to show his power, to show his hand upon Moses' life. What would have happened if Moses had not have reached out his hand and grabbed that snake by the tail and really owned God's empowerment of that staff, God's empowerment of His identity. I wonder in our life how many times we miss out on God's blessing or God's best for us because we're unwilling to be courageous enough to reach out and to take hold of, to own God's anointing or God's empowerment of our identity, God's empowerment of our gifts, our talents, our abilities. You know, I believe that God uses us just the way that we are, and for us to really walk out the fulfillment of all that He has for us, we have to reach out our hand courageously sometimes and take hold of His empowerment of our identity, of our gifts, of our talents, of our abilities.